But if you have to spend an extra $1,000 to $2,000 on special assessments every year, that's going to absolutely crush your numbers.
Welcome to the Freedom Real Estate Podcast with your boy, Andrew Freed. And I'm excited and ecstatic to have Robert Webb. This guy's an absolute killer. He's part of this amazing community, Go Abundance, which I'm a part of. Also a serial entrepreneur, a real estate investor. He's going towards financial independence via condos, townhouses, and the HOA route. So very interesting route. Excited to have you, Robert. How you doing today?
Thanks, man. Doing well. And yeah, HOAs, I think, are widely misunderstood.
Yes. So we're happy to have you here to educate us. But before we get into that, let's bring it back to Robert Webb. Bring you back to your origin story. How did you get started? How did you find investing? How did you find real estate? Where did you get started?
Yeah, so I think like most people, I first got introduced to it through Bigger Pockets. So I had a friend who started buying doors in Philly, and he was renting them out by the room.
Where are you, by the way?
I'm in central New Jersey.
Okay.
If you know, like Princeton area, I'm kind of north of Princeton.
Perfect.
And so he started buying doors, and I just, watched him accumulate one house, 4 rooms, 2 house, another 4 rooms. And I was kind of like, hey man, how are you doing it? And that's when he introduced me to Bigger Pockets and really the Burr method. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. And I already started to get into Roth IRA and stocks and stuff like that. And this just seemed like such a better wealth generator the more and more I got into it. And I was already selling real estate as a real estate agent, still do that today. And so I bought my first place about 3 years after that. But really, the whole financial freedom journey, Bigger Pockets journey, started back probably in 2015.
Okay.
And really never looked back. It's definitely the lion's share of my portfolio now, and definitely the lion's share of my cash flow.
Come around 2015, what did you read? Rich Dad, Poor Dad? What got you into so it sounded like you had somebody who actually showed you the path, and you kind of want to exemplify the way they were doing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go exactly the Philly route or the run by the room route, just strictly because of logistics and overhead. And I was doing well in real estate sales as well. But yeah, definitely got me on kind of the rich dad, poor dad mentality of go this route, go financial freedom, go passive income, and then own true assets. And that's kind of a place where I never really got crazy into like Bitcoin and stuff like that. I've always loved physical stuff.
But it sounds like you've always been an entrepreneur. You were a real estate agent at that point. Like, how did you become an entrepreneur to begin with?
So I always call it my real job. I had my real job at age 22, 23. I lasted 14 months. I started doing the work of 3 people. And I remember I was making 32 grand a year. And
what were you doing?
I was an account rep, like an account manager for a promotional product decorator. So we did embroidery and screen printing. And I was managing all of Canada and half the Northeast. And then they started to give me special divisions like baseball and stuff like that. And they finally gave me a 4th person's work one day. And I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this person's job when I'm already doing my job? And I remember calling my dad at like 24 and just being like, how mad would everyone be if I came home unemployed today? And that really kickstarted it. I had already started to get my real estate license at that point. I was going to go in part-time, and I literally quit that day. I gave my 2 weeks notice, and I never looked back. I immediately got into sales, and my whole thing was, A, if you're going to sell something expensive, and B, I didn't want a ceiling on my income based on how much work I was willing or not willing to put into something.
What year was that?
2013.
2013. Okay, so you decided, F the W-2 life. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to not put a cap in my earning potential, right? So you did. So it sounds like you did that for 2 years, and you found real estate. What did you start buying exactly?
So I tried to buy my 2nd year as a realtor, but the way income works, you can't do that super easily. You need a certain year of tax returns averaged out.
2 years, right?
2 years averaged out of my first year, I made nothing, which is pretty typical in real estate. So probably my first place I bought in 2017. So about 3 or 4 years later, I bought my first rental, full Burr, all money out, still own that property today. And that's how I kind of got introduced into HOAs.
So did you just buy a really crappy condo and you kind of fixed up the condo, fixed up the association? I'm sure there's a lot associated with that. Like, what was the whole business strategy there?
Yeah, so it was probably, so I bought that in, I think in 2017. And so it was kind of the last year of foreclosures. So it was the very tail end of all the 2008 fallout.
Okay.
Market rates weren't crazy. You could still get foreclosures. And so it was probably one of the last ones, needed a full rehab is the best way to put it. And yeah, so we went in there and then I kind of chose between, hey, I had never done any work myself. And I was like, hey, I could learn on the job. Maybe I save money. Worst case, I end up hiring it all out. And my dad and I actually redid that whole place pretty much soup to nuts, bathrooms, kitchens, floors, etc. And that was really how I got introduced into how the refinance portion worked. I didn't fully understand that part yet. And I was able to get about 75% of my money back after that.
Okay.
And keep the same interest rate. So,
yeah. So what'd you buy it for? What'd you put into it? What'd you refi it for? And then what did you do with those proceeds?
So I bought it for 132, which again, when you think of central New Jersey now, you can't touch anything under 350 at this
So what is it? Was it like a 2-bed?
2-bed, 1 bath, 850 square feet.
Rented for what?
At the time, fully rehabbed, I think I got 1425.
Okay, so like the 1% rule.
Yeah, about. And that was like peak rental. Like I was pushing the prices in that community at that time. And yeah, took the proceeds. I paid myself back just because it had depleted me. I bought 2 places that week, chose to focus on that one. And then once I pulled those funds out, I started to work on the second place. So that's where that money went.
You just held them a mortgage for while you're working on the other one.
Yeah.
Okay. So you bought it for 135. You put how much into it? You refied it for what?
Probably about 20 to 25 into it.
Okay.
And then I refied it based on, I think, 165. So you don't get all your money back because of the way you do the loan to values where the banks will let you. So I wasn't able to get 100% of my money back, but I was able to get about 15 to 18,000 of that back. So I was still in the deal for about $8,000 or so.
Okay. Nice. And you still have that rental today?
Yes.
Nice. Actually, I got my first rental was a condo as well. My first property I bought was a condo. Right in Boston.
Was it a personal purchase? Like, did you live there for a bit, or was it full investment?
Completely primary. Back in 2015, where I was financially astute in the fact I know I didn't want to pay somebody else's mortgage, so I decided to buy the cheapest condo in the worst part of Boston. I think I bought it for $222,000. The HOA was in complete distress. The building was constructed in, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago and had these foundation issues. And I decided, hey, this is a good investment.
You still own that one?
So with that one, I ended up not really doing much. I think I probably put like 10, 15 grand into it. But I made the HOA. I got the HOA in a really good place where it was actually being run very well. A lot of the CapEx was taken care of. The common area was upgraded. We got the parking situated. There was roof leaks that I got resolved. And then over time, I owned that for 5 years while I was living in it. And I think it ended up being worth, come around COVID, about $400K. And that was my battle chest to get into real estate investing. So I took a HELOC and I started buying.
Yeah, like the health of an HOA is critical when it comes down to it. But yeah, you definitely can find those ones that are poorly run, and then it's up to you to step in and fix them. I know how much work that can be.
So Robert, you definitely sounds like you're an HOA expert. So tell us, what are some value add strategies that you see when it comes to buying condos and being involved in HOAs?
The value add strategy, from my perspective, I've never gone into an HOA like you and I'll call it rehab the HOA. I actually tend to go the opposite route. I tend to look for extremely healthy HOAs. HOAs that aren't going to have huge assessments. They have their CapEx, accounts in order. They're not going to have a $15,000 roof assessment in the next 2 years. And that's where I think the sweet spot is. A lot of people, when they get into real estate investing, they don't want to do a ton of work. They're doing it for the passive income, right? And what I found is if you found a really good, healthy HOA and a really crappy unit, those things became a beautiful marriage for me in terms of I could put in a lot of upfront work. I could recognize the value that I get out of that unit. And as I hold it for 5, 10, 15 years, I really don't have to do that much work, especially when you rehab plumbing and electrical on the front end. there's only so much that really goes into a condo. There's only so many toilets that can break or kitchen sinks. And when it comes to common elements, assuming it's a healthy HOA, and I just had this happen where the plumbing inside one of my condos, and the plumbing's all connected to other units, so it's the ownership of the condo that broke as they were doing a roof replacement, which I didn't pay for the roof replacement. And when the roofers broke my piping, they came in, fixed it, cleaned up the mold, cleaned up the drywall, and I just had to make a couple phone calls to coordinate all of that. Nothing out of my pocket.
So for our audience that don't really invest in condos, what is an HOA?
So it's a homeowners association, and basically it's when you have a bunch of condos or a bunch of townhomes that are all owned on the community land, you just own your building. So the HOA is the entity or organization that actually manages all of the common elements. And for me, in most places, that's going to include things like the siding, the structure, the foundation, the roof, the sidewalks, snow, trash. And so all those things I'm going to have to pay a monthly fee for, but it's not like those are ghost expenses. It's not like I'm not getting value for that money. I'm paying them for those services and then to also manage those services. So I basically get a built-in property manager. They don't necessarily deal with my tenant, but they deal with probably about 80% of the headaches that I think most investors deal with when it comes to snow removal, tenants not cutting the grass and getting a fine from the city.
So I think the name of the game is more or less you are responsible for everything inside the walls, and typically, obviously, every HOA is different. Typically, everything outside those walls is the responsibility of this homeowners association, which is the umbrella for the entire community that you quote unquote pay into, right?
Yeah, they call them windows in policies. So I own the windows and then inside of that, and that's it.
Exactly. So you take a unique strategy where it's like, I buy value add multi, right? So I try to buy multis really cheap with a lot of the CapEx in bad shape and getting a really good deal. And I'm going to go through the value of increasing it. But you take a different approach. You actually want to find a community where all the CapEx, all of the overhead, all of the large items are actually taken care of. They have a good cushion in the operating account as a whole. And then your only concern is what's inside those walls. Everything outside is in a really good shape in the future, right?
Yeah, 100%. And if something goes wrong, I don't want to say it's not my fault because I'm still a part of the HOA, but I'm not the one managing that project. There's typically an account that's covering that financially.
So it's very much hands off, right? So your responsibility as a landlord only has to do with everything inside of the unit. Everything outside of the unit, you have nothing to do with other than coordinating with your HOA to get it resolved.
Correct. So I don't get those calls for, hey, it's snowing and we need salt, or like, hey, there's something wrong with the siding. It just reduces the calls by like 80%.
So I think that brings up another good point that, you said you have eight condos, 8 townhouses sort of situations that you own. Like that probably requires very little management on your part for that cash flow, right?
Yeah. I'd probably say on average for 8 units, I might spend an hour a month in terms of just kind of the overhead logistics of it all.
That's a pretty good return. For 8 units an hour, not too shabby.
No, it's the beauty of it. And a lot of people hate HOAs because they don't like the rules. I, as the landlord, love the rules. I have a partner in enforcement when it comes to disputes, when it comes to issues. And it's not me. I'm not the bad guy. The HOA is the bad guy. I'm just following their guidelines.
That makes total sense. So for somebody looking to get into condos, to get into HOA investing, what are some really good tips you recommend for them?
My number one is understand the financials of the HOA. And just from selling, I know what communities are good and what aren't, but I have seen people call me because things look like a good deal on paper between purchase price and rental. However, I know the HOA is defunct. I know there's going to be assessments, which are just, fees on top of your already established monthly fee because the HOA is essentially insolvent. And so when you understand the health of the HOA, the financials, the median income of the people in that HOA that can ideally stomach that is probably the secret sauce to understanding if you're going to have long-term success. You can buy a great deal, but if you have to spend an extra $1,000 to $2,000 on special assessments every year, that's going to absolutely crush your numbers. It's going to create a lot of stress, a lot of uncertainty. So understanding how an HOA functions, how they budget, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that people wouldn't necessarily think of.
So your really biggest tip is just do a financial audit, a financial analysis in the HOA to ensure, you investing in this community is not going to cost you money in the long run.
Yeah, basically. And if you do that, again, the majority of headaches are taken off your plate. And that's, for me, that's what passive income, that's what I want out of it.
That's one component of it, right? But I'm sure the other component is screening tenants, right? What happens when do you buy these properties with inherited tenants? Do you buy vacant? How do you typically stabilize something like this?
So I always try to buy vacant. I don't like to inherit tenants. You have very little control when that happens. And in a state like New Jersey, which tends to have tenant favored laws, that can be really difficult. So we actually just acquired a property that we're currently rehabbing, and there was a tenant in there, and 4 or 5 times throughout the transaction, they were like, "Hey, tenants, can you take the tenant? Can you take the tenant?" It was my only sticking point. I didn't care about the condition. I didn't care about the HVAC. I didn't care about whatever. It's like, it needs to be delivered vacant. And so it took an extra 2.5 months. I think it took some money on the landlord's part to get them out, but ultimately it was delivered to me vacant. And when I rehab it, when I flip it back to the market, like, I'm going to get a peak tenant due to the condition. And then, to your point, due to tenant screening.
And what sort of strategies do you utilize to get good tenants?
So I would probably say a not common strategy, which is, so that property, I could probably get $5,000 for that property a month, and I'm probably going to list it for $4,850. I want great tenants that understand great value, that also come with great paying jobs and great credit scores. And so I'm willing to take an initial discount to get that place rented by an awesome person, because to the point of being an HOA, I'm doing this for very little headaches. I want the passive income. I don't necessarily need to maximize every single dollar. I can do that over time. My rents will appreciate, my property will appreciate, but tenant selection is probably the most critical thing. And when you're a smaller investor like me, smaller portfolio compared to someone with hundreds of units, one tenant can make or break my cash flow for a year. And so I would rather take $100 less per month on a unit, knowing, okay, I'm missing out on $1,000, but get someone that is going to allow me to continue 1 hour a month worth of work.
Yeah, more or less you're hedging your bets, right? So you're also a broker, right? So does that give you an advantage as an investor? And if so, how do you utilize that advantage to find good deals?
I think the 2 major advantages I get is, one, I get to see other people in the deals they do. So like, what is common for the marketplace? I get to see what mistakes or successes they have. And then 2, I do get deals before other people. The deal I was just mentioning, we acquired, we probably got a 35% discount on that. And we knew about that before it was coming to market. And so, when you're an investor and a broker, and you get access to these things, you're going to pounce on them before they even hit. Now, when it comes to, I guess, being a broker, it's understanding. I probably have a better understanding of, again, what's acceptable in the marketplace, but also what things are going to trade at compared to someone who just doesn't do this on a day-to-day basis. I can make a decision. If it's in my core market, I can make a decision in 3 minutes, right? Because I'm just constantly looking at real estate, versus someone who's maybe getting into it or dabbling, or not what I would call a full-time investor. They're going to need days to underwrite it, days to understand their financials. I could do that in 3 minutes at this point.
Yeah, so I think more or less you're saying you put the reps in, so you'll be able to make that. You'll be able to take the action real quick, right? Same with me. Like I own hundreds and hundreds of units. I know certain markets what units rent for. I know what certain markets what units trade for, because I own units in those markets. Every single day I'm refining in those markets. Every single day I'm selling in those markets. Every single day I'm buying in those markets, right?
100%, and that is such an advantage. In New Jersey, we're still negative 50% supplied compared to 6 years ago. So if you're not quick, someone else is coming in, and they're coming in with cash. So you have to make those decisions very quickly.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest advantages for a business owner today is speed to action, right? If you're, especially in real estate, if you're slow to make a decision, you're not going to get the deal. Simple as that. Right?
Yeah, 100%. And we see that on the business side too. You just don't have time to lament on problems and situations for 3 weeks. Make a decision, move on, go to the best of your ability, and you can readjust later if you really need to.
Absolutely. So, I think I've learned a lot from my successes, but I've also learned a lot from my failures. So go over kind of your biggest failure when it comes to investing in condos, investing in HOAs, and what would you have done differently?
I will say I've been pretty blessed on the decisions that I've made in terms of I really haven't had like a completely sideways or negative deal. I am pretty careful about what I choose to go into. I would honestly say the biggest regret that I have, and I know it wasn't exactly the question, there was a property in Flemington, New Jersey, probably about 4 years ago on the market, and I went something like 25,000 over asking, complete dumb foreclosure in 2022. And like I thought I was going to win going X amount over. I would have paid another 10. and it's more so that I missed out on a great property over a small amount of money that probably would have returned 10x by now over 4 years between everything. But yeah, I would say in general, most of my properties have been pretty calculated.
Yeah. I mean, you really can't regret shots taken. I mean, you took the shot. It's just you didn't land the hit.
Yeah, exactly. But I always tell that story, and if I can go back, I would have paid 10K in a heartbeat for that property. And I think that's the biggest thing is people get so lost in the numbers, they get lost in the spreadsheets. Like that ROI, whatever underwriting you're doing, that's for day zero. That thing's going to change the second you get a tenant in there. The second the market appreciates, the second rents increase or decline. Real estate doesn't move on a spreadsheet. You kind of just have to understand the macro trends of your market and act accordingly. And yeah, I wish I had done a better job at that.
So it sounds like over the course of since 2017, you slowly were accumulating condos over the years until today. What, like 1 or 2 a year? Sorry, 1 or 2 every year or two?
Well, so we do a couple other deals. We flip property too. We've wholesaleed a couple. So we don't keep everything. And I'm starting to buy with partners now to ramp up. My goal is to kind of buy 3 or 4 per year for the next 3 years.
Okay.
As I found partners that I want to be in business with, especially now that I feel very established taking other people's money. That was a big hurdle for me. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to bring risk to other people when I wasn't 100% sure. And I'm kind of in that place now where I'm starting to partner with the right people.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a really good point where it's like taking people's money is a huge responsibility, mm-hmm. and nobody should do it lightly,
100%. I feel like I'm probably within my market, within what I do, I'm an expert. I still feel extremely cautious in having someone write me a check and getting out of it, refinance that thing as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So I always like to ask all of my guests this question. If you could give 3 pieces of advice to your younger self on how to be successful today, what 3 pieces of advice would you give?
The first one is definitely start sooner. I started, I think, when I was 27. And even then I had a property under contract at 25. It just didn't work out. But I would have, if I can go back and tell myself or tell someone else, push for that deal. It will work out. Time solves almost every real estate issue that you could have.
Totally.
Number 2 is, I'd probably say don't be afraid to push the envelope a little bit more. I would say compared to the average person, I probably have a higher risk tolerance, but I would say compared to the circles I'm in, I have a lower risk tolerance. And I think, maybe pushing your boundaries, you don't have to go 50% above your comfort level, but 10% and kind of getting out of it. That's where you really learn. It's where you really grow. And it's really where that's where steel is made, right? Out in the heat zone, outside of the comfort zone. So I would say that. And then third, it's a little bit of a cliche because I do understand the risk of it, but I probably would have partnered with people earlier. Probably would have said, hey, I probably would have given myself a little bit more credit for what I had achieved up to say 5 years ago and enacted on that a little bit sooner. I think not only for myself, but a big passion that I have today is bringing success to the right people around me. And essentially I eliminated 5 years of that potential by just being a little too scared. So I guess all those really kind of tie together, but I would say the third one is being okay finding the right people sooner and taking that risk.
All good tips. So I also like to ask my guests this question. So what are 3 books that really changed your life?
So cliche answer, Rich Dad, Poor Dad gave me a whole new mindset on money. I think a lot of your guests will say that. I'm sure it probably had an impact on your life too.
Absolutely.
I think the two are a little bit less conventional and a lot more specific to me, but I love sharing them. And the first one is The Gap and the Gain by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. And it really reshaped the way I looked at my successes and where I thought I was lacking. And the book is all about how to look at where you've come from instead of always moving the goalpost further and further. And it really helped me reshape success and then also reshape goal making. And then the third book it's called The Courage to Be Disliked. And as someone who is an inherent people pleaser, and I gave way too much of my own self-value away to other people and their opinions of me, I would say once I read that book 2 to 3 years ago, it really unleashed me to become my own person, really establish my own value system. And I do think that's a lot of why I'm able to be a bit more firm and definitive today. It's probably some of the reasons we couldn't take those risks 5 years ago, is I had way too much wrapped up in other people.
I mean, ultimately, it's impossible to be authentic if you care what other people think about you, right? Like, how could you be yourself, right?
100%, man. And like, how do you outsource that job? Like, that's crazy. But that's what I did all in my 20s.
Totally. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I was thankfully born with the last name Freed, so I didn't have an option. I had to either just be it or not be it, right? Well, Robert, I just want to thank you so much for coming and educating our audience on HOAs and the power of real estate investing and reaching financial independence. So if our audience wants to connect with you and find more about you, where can they connect?
So best place, Instagram, Realtor Robert Webb. You can always check out our website, destinationnj.com. And we have a YouTube channel under the same name.
Cool. Well, I appreciate it, Rob. Thank you for coming on the Freedom Real Estate Podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to subscribe, follow. We appreciate it. Have a good one, folks.